You're listening to Switched On Australia, the podcast that tracks the opportunities and challenges of electrifying everything, everywhere. Switched On is brought to you by the publishers of Renew Economy, Australia's best informed, most read website focusing on the green energy transition, and is supported by Boundless Earth. Boundless Earth uses philanthropy, investment and direct advocacy to help Australia become a global force in a decarbonised world. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Switched On Australia podcast. I'm Anne Delaney, speaking to you from Bundjalung country in northern New South Wales. Thanks for joining me. Now, it's estimated that Australians are spending $4 billion more each year on electricity than we need to, simply because we're not on the best energy plan available to us. And while government and industry encourage us just to shop around and switch retailers, very few of us actually do. And it's no surprise, comparing plans is tedious, confusing and time-consuming. The process is opaque and, for many, just too hard. My guest today is trying to change that, not just to simplify the process, but to help us potentially save hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And he's doing it using a little-known piece of legislation that only recently became available to energy consumers, the Consumer Data Right. This law gives us the right to access our own energy data or to give someone else permission to do so on our behalf. Now, why would we want to do that? Because our energy data is valuable. With the right tools, it can help answer questions like, do I need a battery? Is my solar system big enough? What should I consider if I want to buy an EV? Is my existing setup working properly? And crucially, what's the best energy plan for me, not the one a retailer or a third party wants me on? Until the end of 2023, this kind of information was largely controlled by the energy industry. Now we have access to it too. Matt Peterson is very familiar with the Consumer Data Right. A former banking technologist turned clean energy entrepreneur, he turned his own frustrating experience trying to switch electricity retailers into a startup that could help the rest of us. Matt is the founder of Automised Energy, a platform that uses automation and data to help Australians find the best energy plan without the hassle. I began by asking Matt to describe the experience that led him to start the company.
Yeah, that's right. I was working at a bank for 10 years in technology-related departments and senior management. And one day I found that my retail provider of energy actually went bust, went belly up. And I found myself on a totally surprising plan with a retailer that I didn't choose. I was just forced onto this plan. And I was forced then to do my research as to what this plan was and is it good for me or are there other ones that are better for me? And so that kicked off my journey into discovering how complex this world is and how there are limited tools out there to actually make sense of it for you and make it an easy thing to do.
I understand you started with a spreadsheet, but you didn't find that was very satisfying. You needed more than a spreadsheet.
So I'm an analytical person and I love spending time in spreadsheets, but it wasn't good enough for this job. As hard as I tried and as many hours as I spent, I couldn't actually find a way to assess every single plan. So yeah, I used my software development background, I'm a software engineer, to actually solve the problem for myself using a custom software application. I've got experience with the Consumer Data Right, which is the Australian ecosystem that forces retailers to share energy data with consumers. It's a relatively new program. So I used that experience with my software development background and developed this system that for me solved that problem and instantly showed me that the plan I had been put on was by far the worst plan that I could have been put on. And it would have cost me many, many hundreds of dollars more than what I would have paid on the best plan. And so I instantly switched to the best plan and haven't looked back since.
So, I mean, what have you developed? What have you come up with in order to be able to make those comparisons and those assessments?
Yeah, so it's a program that links directly with your retailer. So in my case, originally it was Origin Energy, and linked directly to them, accessed all my usage history as well as the technical details about my meter, some other information about my solar panels that I have and things like that. These are all the bits of information that the retailer holds on you. Through the consumer data right, I'm able to access that data, and then I can use that to calculate against every single other plan that's available and compatible with the meter and the property. And that allows me to then accurately calculate exactly which plan suits my usage patterns.
You mentioned the consumer data right. I would presume that as individuals, we have the right to access our own data. But if you're setting up a service for someone else, you can have the right to actually access people's data, retail data?
Yeah, correct. It's all very regulated, and it's only with the consumer's consent, explicit and express consent. So with my setup on the consumer data right, I can get the express consent from the consumer and access their data directly from their retailer.
And so this right is fairly new?
Yeah, it started off in banking, which is where my background in banking comes into it. And I had first-hand access to helping set up some of the first interactions on the consumer data right in Australia. And the consumer data right actually went live in the energy sector at the end of 2023 with the big four energy retailers, and then everyone else joined them last year. So it is relatively new. It's only in the last couple of years that it's come about, and there's not a lot of people who are familiar with it yet.
I didn't know about it, to be honest.
No, that's right, and most people don't. So I'm trying to capitalize on the fact that I do know about it, and I've got a background in it, and I've got connections within it, to make this service that can really help consumers.
So, Matt, can you walk me through what happens when a new user signs up to Automised Energy? What's the experience like from their point of view?
Yeah, so I'm trying to make it as absolute simple and easy and quick as possible. So the first step is that we ask them to link to their retailer so that we can access their data directly. And that step is a simple three-step process of getting their consent. And they need to not only provide us with the consent, but also provide their retailer with the consent. And all of that user interface is taken care of by the consumer data right ecosystem. And so it's just a couple of steps through. Then once we have that consent, it all happens in the background, basically. So we, in the background, access that data, collect that data, do all the calculations and present the results to the consumer. And it all takes about 10 seconds to do all of that.
Mm.
So the consent process only takes about 2 minutes, and then the calculations take about 10 seconds. So it's all very quick and very simple. So what that results in for the consumer is a list of all the plans that are applicable to their meter and their address, and the cost for them per year, and also their current plan and the cost for them per year, and then the difference between them. So essentially what we're doing is finding the best match plan for each consumer. So we're not like a comparison service which shows you all the plans and then leaves it up to the consumer to then go and compare and find out which one's best for them. We actually find out which one is best for them and do the comparison for them and tell them, this is your best plan and here's how much it's likely to save you.
And you actually want to start up a subscription model. Why would people want to keep changing their plan, though? Like, if you've got a subscription plan and you keep updating people with what the best plan is, why would people want to keep changing?
Yeah, so the market's always changing. The plans are always changing. We're seeing hundreds of plans being changed every night. So we collect market plan data every night, and we see hundreds of plans change every night. And particularly at the times of year around June, July, August, it seems to be the season. And there's literally thousands of plans changing then. Not only that, but your current plan that you're on will change as well. As everyone knows, prices have gone up a lot in the last few years, and they're set to go up again later this year. So with all that changing market position, as well as changing usage habits, the plan that is best for you today is not necessarily going to be the plan that's best for you next month or in 6 months or in 12 months. And in fact, what we find is people who have been on the same plan for 12 months or more, almost guaranteed that their plan is not the best one for them.
That's interesting. So, why should consumers trust a brand new startup with their energy decisions when, the market is becoming a bit littered with apps and brokers and switching tools, and we've got the
Yeah.
government's Energy Made Easy and the Victorian Energy Compare tools, I think it's called.
Yep.
And there's commercial comparison sites. Well, why go with something like Automised Energy?
Yeah, so the differentiator that we try and bring to the table in that regard is that we don't take commissions from any of the retailers. We are 100% independent, and we really want to work for the consumer and in the consumer's best interest. So that's our big differentiator from other, and I'll put in air quotes, commercial comparison sites. We also canvass 100% of the available market offers, not just a select few that we have deals with, because we don't have any deals with any of them. And in regards to the government provided comparison sites, they're a great start because they are independent and they cover the whole canvas of retailers as well. But they are just a start. So they are limited in some of the things that they do or don't do, in fact. And I know from talking to the guys that run Energy Made Easy, for example, that we do calculations that they don't. So I know we're a lot more accurate, and I know that we actually take it that step further and actually provide recommended plans that we know are going to be compatible with the consumer. Not just all plans available, but ones that are also compatible. So it makes it a lot simpler. And we do the automated monthly assessment for consumers as well. So they don't have to come back and check again when they remember or next time they get a bill. We do it for them and just send a report and say, here's where you stand now with your current plan.
So how much can I, on average, say, how much can I save by using a service like this? Have you calculated that?
Yeah, so we've had over 300 users through the system now, and what we're seeing is that that people can save between $400 and $500 on average.
A year.
Yeah, per year on their power bills, they can reduce their power bills. So putting that into context, the federal government's energy bill relief was $300 in the last year, and they've announced another $150 for next year. But people can get way more than that just by finding the best plan that suits their usage patterns, and that's what we provide.
And so how much do I have to pay for this service that you're offering?
So we want to make it really risk-free and don't put up any barriers for people to come and actually find out how much they can save. So anyone can actually come and get an assessment through Automised Energy for free and find out how much they're overpaying for their current bill. The way that we can stay sustainable, though, is not by getting money from the retailers, like I said before, but we actually do charge a subscription fee if the savings available is over $250 per year.
Mm-hmm.
And the consumer sees that up front. It's sort of a no-brainer guarantee almost, where we say, okay, we've found that we can save you more than $250, and for that, to access the details of that plan, it's going to cost $50 per year to access those details. So $50 to save more than $250 is quite compelling in my view.
Right. And for that $50, every month you'll send me a report and notify me whether or not I'm still on the best plan.
Yeah, that's right. So we will do that automatically every month, and that's part of the subscription, so you don't have to worry about it again. It's a bit of a set and forget program. As well as that, we've just released actually a usage history chart within Automised Energy. So some people we were finding were a bit hesitant to change providers because they didn't know if the new provider would provide the same sort of usage history that their old provider did. So we've introduced usage history into Automised Energy so that you can access your usage history consistently regardless of who your provider is. So you can drop and change, switch without worrying that you're losing any features.
So who's the service mainly aimed at? I'm presuming householders, but if you move more into the commercial sector, will you be charging more than $50 a year?
Yeah, so it's only residential at the moment. We really want to help the everyday Aussie who is bamboozled by the energy options out there, and we know are most likely getting the wool pulled over their eyes and paying too much. So we really want to help them first and foremost. And there's 9 million Aussies on the Australian grid. There's a lot of people to help, and so that's why we're really focusing in that area at the moment. I guess the people who stand to benefit the most, or we find want to benefit the most, are those that are really time poor, who have young families, and they know that they're overpaying. Everyone sees the news and talks around barbecues about how much they pay for energy, and they know they're overpaying, but they just don't have time to wade through all the options and work it all out. And who does, really? So that's the sort of market that tends to be the first to come to us and say, oh, that's great, that's exactly what I want. That saves me time, that saves me money, and I can put it on autopilot. It's fantastic.
Because, the government still says that, if you're not happy with your energy plan, you can just switch. And
Just shop around. It's easy,
shop
right?
around. It's not easy.
It's not easy, exactly.
Yeah.
No, so that's one of the things we tell people that we do. We shop around for you.
You describe Automised Energy as a set and forget solution, but can any energy decision truly be set and forget, especially, where with changing usage patterns or even household dynamics?
Yeah, no. Well, that's exactly why we do reassess every month, because things do change. I guess what we've talked about at the moment is just the energy bill and on a common plan. The thing that is coming very quickly down the line is more complicated setups where households have batteries and they're participating in a marketplace through either a VPP, which is a virtual power plant, or through a retailer like Amber Energy, who exposes the consumer to the wholesale market. And when we get to those points and those decision points around, do I need a battery and how does that help me? And is my solar system big enough? What happens when I get an electric vehicle and I need to charge it? Those sort of complications are coming thick and fast at us. And that's on our roadmap to address next, is how can we help households deal with those decisions and make the best decision that's not going to result in them paying more than they need to, or having something that they don't use. This is all the things we can do with access to the data. We can do all these calculations and optimize the solutions and answers to the questions that the households have.
As you say, it's, access to data seems to be obviously really key for your business model and your ongoing plans for the future. What steps have you taken to ensure customer data isn't shared or commercialised in ways that the consumers might not expect? How do you protect that data?
Yeah, that's right. So the consumer data right, which is the framework which allows me to access this data, is heavily regulated. Like I mentioned before, it's regulated by the ACCC, and which is the Australian Consumer and Competition Commission, which oversees all the competition in Australia, business competition. And it's also overseen by Australia's Privacy Commission.
Yes.
So between those two, the regulation is very strict on what we can and can't do with the data we collect. And part of that regulation says everything we do with that data must be outlined clearly within the consent process for the consumer to agree to. So as part of that consent process that I mentioned earlier, when you sign up to Automised Energy, it'll be all outlaid clearly there exactly what we do and what we don't do with the data. We've got a comprehensive privacy policy that covers it all as well. And effectively, at the moment, that all reads that we collect the data for the sole purpose of finding you better energy deals and no other purpose. And in fact, once we're done with that data, if the consumer cancels their account with Automised Energy or asks us to otherwise, we delete all of their data, even the statistical data related to that consumer. That regulation also covers the information security minimal implementation that must be adhered to house all the data as well. And like I said before, the consumer data right first came about with banking. So all of that information security guidelines is based around banking grade security. And so that's what we utilize with Automised Energy as well. So it's banking level security in a heavy regulated and audited environment of the consumer data right.
Mm. Can I just go back to some of those average savings that you mentioned?
Yep.
You said that the average savings rate, between 400 and 500. I was just wondering how that figure is calculated. Is that across different states, income brackets, solar, non-solar users, just out of interest?
That is overall at the moment. That is based on every user we've seen come through the system.
Right.
That's the potential savings that we've calculated for them.
And so you can't define whether or not there are differences in states or anything?
No, and there's two reasons why we can't do that. One, for starters, we don't have enough data through different states and different profiles to be able to break that down accurately enough yet, because we're too young. And two, part of that data privacy is around not doing that as well, and
Right.
not disclosing data that could even come close to being reassembled.
Right.
So at a overall level, that's fine, but any sort of more granular than that at the moment, I'm actually not allowed to.
Okay. Matt, what was the biggest challenge you faced in getting this service up and running?
It's early days with the consumer data right. It's still in its infancy. There's still a lot of teething problems. So getting data that comes through from retailers in a consistent and standard format is more difficult than it probably was envisaged to be, and more difficult than it really needs to be. And it's getting a lot better, and the retailers are being really good in coming to the table when issues are being brought up and actually resolving those issues, which is encouraging. So it's getting better and it's getting easier to make this service apply to everyone. But there was some hairy days early on where, yes, a lot of retailers were not providing the data that was useful.
Right, okay, so they weren't particularly compliant because it wasn't something that they'd had to do before?
Correct. It was all new for everyone. So, their systems had teething problems, and they didn't know until someone actually told them.
Right. Is there a big stick if they don't comply?
There can be, yes, there can be. It's federal legislation that retailers comply with the consumer data right. And there's a process for identifying bugs and squishing bugs. But if it's something bigger than that, if it's not just a bug, if it's a blatant disregard for the regulation, then there is big sticks, yes.
So if the retailers change their terms of data sharing, that's not going to have an impact on what you do?
No, because those terms are governed by the consumer data right, and it's standard across all retailers. And I'm part of that consumer data right, so I will know when any changes happen and know in advance so I can adapt to them as well.
Now, your future plans that you briefly mentioned, and it's on your website, there are things like tariff alerts, solar optimization, hot water settings. Just explain how that would all work, because that sounds like it's getting a lot more complicated.
Yeah, well, it's solving complicated problems in an easy way is the intent. So one of the next things on the roadmap is around fault identification, and that involves monitoring data on a daily basis from a household and identifying if there's any signatures of or patterns that indicate something's gone wrong. And typically this is around large loads like hot water systems. And so if a hot water system, which we can identify through either typical hot water tariff, which is called controlled load, or through usage signatures, if something happens and that hot water system is on continuously when typically it shouldn't be, or previously it hasn't been, then we can sort of flag that as a potential fault and alert the consumer that, hey, it looks like there's an issue with your hot water system.
Can retailers do that for customers now, though?
Oh, yeah. So Automised Energy doesn't have access to any data that the retailer doesn't already have. So the retailer can technically do anything that we're doing if they wanted to.
Right.
I think that's the difference, though, is
They don't.
that they don't want to. That's not what they're being paid to do. Essentially, like they're doing a good job of a separate complex task, which is billing and providing a retail service of electricity. But beyond that, that's not what they're being paid to do, and so that's the gap I'm trying to fill.
Is there any way that they will try and stop this service? A lot of them are very stuck in old business models.
Again, it comes back to the consumer data right, and the fact that they are compelled by legislation to share this data if requested to. So provided that legislation is in force, then there's nothing they can do to prevent it. What they can do, I guess, is try to compete with it. But like I said, they're really up to their eyeballs in just doing the job that they're being paid to do at the moment, which is retailing the electricity.
Now, you were going to go on to solar optimization and some of those hot water settings that you're going to be moving into. Tell me what you're going to be doing there.
Well, it's more on the fault identification, and I had a personal experience where one of my solar panels stopped working on my roof, and I didn't know about it for 9 months. And because of the way that solar panels are strung together, it knocked out half of my solar production. And I wasn't monitoring my inverter data at the time. I wasn't monitoring my bills closely enough, and I just didn't realize that had happened. But if you've got a service monitoring that data for you, and it can then alert you to if something does go wrong. And I've seen it happen on a few other occasions as well. And just recently, this customer got in touch and said, "Can you see what's happening with my solar data? Because I don't think it's quite right." And I looked at it and went, "Oh yeah, you haven't produced any solar data since this date. And in fact, you're importing more now as well as a result of that." And so you can see with the data when things go wrong. And if you can alert someone to that sooner than when they would otherwise realize it, then you're saving them time, money, and hassle. And so that's part of the fault identification feature that we're working on at the moment.
Now, it's early days, Matt. Just a final question. How hopeful are you that you're plugging a gap in the system?
Yeah, it's been very positive feedback from everyone who's used Automised Energy to date. And, we've seen some really big savings of over $3,000 a year. There's a lot of savings of over $1,000 a year. And as I said, the average is, close to $500 a year. We're buoyed by that. We're buoyed by all the feedback we get that says, wow, this service has literally changed my life because I've got spare cash to pay off these other debts. And we've got people sending through their bills showing me how they're paying so much less now than they were, and they're really thankful that we've been able to optimize their retail bill for them. That really keeps us going and motivated. So I think it's exciting that we could have the potential to help Australia save up to $4 billion in overpayments that they're currently overpaying on their energy bills.
$4 billion? How did you come up with that figure?
Well, there's 9 million households on the grid, and if each of them on average are overpaying by $500, then that adds up to around the $4 billion mark.
And that's not insignificant.
No, that's right.
Matt Peterson, thanks so much for joining the Switched On podcast today.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks very much.
And Matt Peterson is the founder of Automised Energy, a platform that will help Australians navigate the complex world of energy retail. And I'll check back in with Matt in a few months to see how the business is evolving and whether it does get to expand into some of those other services he mentioned, like fault detection and helping householders better understand their energy resources for the future. Next time on the Switched On podcast, I'll be chatting with Shalonda Baker, a former Biden advisor and now a professor at the University of Michigan, about energy justice and why equity matters in the energy transition. Until then, I'm Anne Delaney.